Spring Festival 2021. A man sits across from his 80-year-old grandfather in a small town in Henan Province, central China. The grandfather wants to write his memoir. He has the stories, decades of them. What he does not have is the ability to type, to organize his thoughts, to turn a lifetime into text on a screen. The man sitting across from him is one of the most senior AI executives in China, vice president at SenseTime, the country's most valuable AI company. He has spent 6 years building intelligence for governments, for surveillance networks, for entire cities, and none of it can help his grandfather tell his own story. That man's name is Yan Junjie. He is 31 years old, and in that moment, a belief took root that would cost him millions of dollars in stock options and reshape the global AI industry. The entire Chinese AI establishment was serving the wrong customer. Within a year, Yan quit SenseTime at peak valuation, founded a company called MiniMax, and was told by every major investor in Beijing that he was building a fraud. Within 4 years, that fraud was the #1 AI app in the United States, 17 times cheaper than Anthropic, and a $60 billion American AI company had publicly accused it of stealing their technology. This is how a grandson's frustration became a structural weapon, and why the most powerful AI companies on Earth are trying to stop the man who built it. Yan Junjie was born in 1989 in a county town in Henan, one of China's poorest inland provinces. He was surrounded by people whose intelligence had nowhere to go. The gap was not between people and technology, it was between capability and access. In high school, Yan found the standard math curriculum too slow, so he taught himself advanced calculus, independently, outside the system, on his own time. That pattern, when the structure cannot deliver what you need, you build around it, would define everything he did for the next 2 decades. Bachelor's in Mathematics from Southeast University, 2010. Doctorate in AI from the Chinese Academy of Sciences by 2015. Postdoctoral research at Tsinghua, an internship at Baidu. Every step was meritocratic. By 25, he had climbed from a Henan County town to the peak of Chinese academic AI on raw capability alone. Then he hit the ceiling. In 2015, he joined SenseTime, China's most valuable AI company, rose to vice president, deputy director of the Research Institute, CTO of Smart City. 6 years building systems that could map a city, read a face, analyze a crowd. The work was technically brilliant. The customer was always an institution. The end user was never a person. Intelligence was powerful, but locked inside systems that served power, not people. SenseTime was preparing for its Hong Kong IPO at roughly $15 billion. OpenAI had not yet launched ChatGPT. The assumption everywhere was that AI serves institutions first and reaches consumers eventually. And then came that Spring Festival visit. The decade of institutional AI collapsed into a single scene at his grandfather's table. Yan walked away from SenseTime at the most financially optimal moment to stay, forfeited stock options worth millions, and started a company built on a belief no one in China shared. AI must serve individuals, not institutions. He named it MiniMax, after the MiniMax algorithm in game theory, a strategy to minimize the worst-case outcome while maximizing the best-case gain. That name was not clever branding. It was the worldview of a man who chose to protect his downside while playing for the maximum result. December 2021. Yan founds MiniMax with fewer than 50 people. The thesis is that multimodal AI, encompassing text, speech, image, and video, can all be delivered from a single unified architecture. That category does not exist. Early 2022, Yan pitches every major Chinese internet company and tech investor. The response is unanimous. They genuinely believed we were frauds. That is Yan's own description 4 years later in a Bloomberg interview. A 32-year-old former VP who walked away from guaranteed wealth, being told by the people who control capital in Chinese tech that his idea is technically implausible and commercially absurd. No one invests. And then a lifeline from an unexpected corner. The first believer is not an AI investor. It is MiHoYo, the gaming studio behind Genshin Impact. MiHoYo's founders understand something the VC establishment does not. The next generation of game characters will need exactly the kind of AI Yan is building. Characters that speak, emote, respond dynamically across text and voice. MiHoYo invests roughly $30 million at a $170 million pre-money valuation. Untitled Capital adds another $30 million by July 2022. It's enough to survive, but not enough to compete at scale. For nearly a year, the team operates in total obscurity, training text, speech, and image models simultaneously, while every other Chinese startup builds text first. Limited compute, limited capital, zero market validation. But because MiniMax cannot brute force performance with massive GPU clusters, the engineers develop architecturally efficient approaches from day one. The seeds of lightning attention are planted here, not as a research project, but as a survival requirement. When you cannot buy your way to an advantage, you engineer one. November 30th, 2022, OpenAI launches ChatGPT. Every Chinese tech company pivots overnight. The six tigers emerge as the cohort of Chinese AI-native startups: Moonshot AI, Zhipu, Baichuan, 01.ai, StepFun, and MiniMax. But of the six, only MiniMax was founded before ChatGPT. The others are reactions. MiniMax is the prediction that ChatGPT confirmed. The same investors who called Yan a fraud now compete for allocation. MiniMax has something none of them have: 11 months of multimodal model training and a team that already knows how to build under constraints. And the rejection that nearly killed the company has produced a second advantage: full strategic independence. That foundation is what made everything that followed possible. Every other Chinese AI lab launches a ChatGPT clone, an enterprise API, a chatbot for businesses. Yan does something entirely different. He launches an AI companion app called Talkie, not for developers, but for ordinary people. Not in China, but in the United States. By mid-2024, Talkie surpasses Character.AI to become the #1 AI companion app by downloads in the United States. The Wall Street Journal reports 11 million monthly active users globally. 73% of MiniMax's revenue is international. And the users are not just consumers, they are an engine. Every conversation generates training signal across text, speech, and emotional response patterns. The data is proprietary and self-funding. Users pay to generate it. A pure API company like OpenAI sells tokens to developers. It does not observe how millions of people emotionally engage with AI across dozens of languages. Better models produce stickier experiences. Stickier experiences produce more diverse training data. More diverse data produces better models. By September 2025, Talkie reaches 27.6 million monthly active users, 9 times the 2023 figure. The consumer product is not a revenue stream bolted onto a research lab. It is the research lab's most valuable training infrastructure. Consumer revenue hits $53 million, up a 143% year over year. But Anthropic is watching, quietly, in its own API data. Anthropic begins noticing anomalous patterns. MiniMax linked accounts consuming Claude at volumes that do not match normal developer behavior. The surveillance has begun. And the question MiniMax must answer is urgent. How do you serve 27 million users when US competitors charge $5 to $25 per million tokens, and your price is 30 cents? US export controls block NVIDIA's best chips from entering China. Every Chinese AI lab faces the same hardware constraint. Most lobby, most complain. MiniMax responds the way Yan has responded to constraints his entire life. The team develops lightning attention, a hybrid attention mechanism that reduces computational complexity from quadratic to linear. Standard transformer attention scales with the square of the input length. Double the input, quadruple the cost. Lightning attention flips the math. Double the input, double the cost. That is the difference between a 4 million token context window being commercially viable and being financially impossible. Every 8th attention layer uses standard softmax to preserve quality. The other 7 use lightning attention to cut cost. Then comes mixture of experts. MiniMax M2.1 carries 229 billion total parameters, but activates only 10 billion per token, routing each token to just 2 of 32 expert sub-networks. The knowledge of a massive model at the inference cost of a small one. Combined, MiniMax prices API access at 30 cents input and $1.1 output per million tokens. Anthropic charges $5 and $25 for Claude Opus. That is not a discount. That is 10 to 17 times cheaper. In January 2025, MiniMax publishes its technical report on ARXCP. Publishing proves the pricing advantage is architecture-driven, not subsidized. It establishes MiniMax as an originator, not a copyist. By Q4 2025, the results land. On the Open Router leaderboard, MiniMax becomes the #1 model by token volume. Chinese models collectively capture 61% of global token usage. The pricing is getting more sustainable, not less. OpenAI faces a dilemma: match MiniMax's pricing and destroy margins, or maintain premium pricing and watch developers leave. Neither has published an equivalent to Lightning Attention. But Anthropic's attention has sharpened for a different reason. If MiniMax built all of this independently, why are MiniMax-linked accounts consuming Claude at industrial scale? And then, in 3 months, 3 separate forces converge. December 2024. Talkie is quietly removed from the US iOS App Store. No public statement. No legal proceeding. The TikTok precedent has arrived at MiniMax's most valuable consumer product. The consumer flywheel's highest value market, American iOS users, is severed. January 2025. DeepSeek releases R1 as open source, a frontier-capable model at zero cost for anyone willing to self-host. It devalues the proprietary model narrative for every Chinese AI company. If the model layer is free, what is the moat? MiniMax's answer is the consumer product layer, which DeepSeek does not have. Then comes the third blow. February 23, 2026. Anthropic goes public with an accusation it has been building for months. 24,000 fake accounts. 13 million Claude API exchanges linked to MiniMax. Nearly half of that traffic redirected to Claude when Anthropic's latest model launched. The accusation does not claim MiniMax stole code. It claims something more precise: that MiniMax used Anthropic's model outputs as training data to accelerate its own agentic capabilities. The Talkie removal targets distribution. DeepSeek targets pricing. Anthropic targets legitimacy. Surviving all three simultaneously requires that the underlying structural advantages are real, not narrative constructs. If MiniMax's capabilities were partly derived from Claude distillation, the entire architecture of cheapness story gets more complicated. Despite all three threats, revenue grows 159% to $79 million. Time bombs, not detonations. And MiniMax's answer to all of them is the most aggressive possible move: go public. MiniMax IPOs on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, $619 million raised. Stock surges 109%. Market cap is $13.7 billion. Jensen Huang has publicly called MiniMax world-class and spent 2 hours with Yan in Beijing. The boy from Henan, who taught himself calculus, is now a billionaire at 36. But the filings reveal the math underneath. $79 million in revenue against $253 million in R&D. Adjusted net loss was $251 million. Cloud compute alone exceeds $150 million a year. MiniMax is a research operation that also sells products, not a product company that does research. The market is pricing the architecture born in scarcity, the consumer flywheel, the token dominance, at 173 times revenue. Public markets demand margin progression, not just growth. MiniMax is the only one that must perform in public every 90 days. In early 2026, the Trump administration relaxed chip export controls. H100 and A100 GPUs may become available to Chinese AI labs, and this is the cruelest turn in MiniMax's story. The hardware constraint that forced Lightning Attention, the architectural innovation at the center of everything MiniMax built, may be lifting. If every Chinese lab gets H100 access, the incentive to optimize architecture diminishes. The constraint that made MiniMax different could be the one whose removal makes it ordinary. The Anthropic accusation sits unresolved. No formal legal action, no public exoneration, a permanent question mark over the innovation narrative. Talkie's US distribution remains constrained, iOS gone, Android available, the flywheel turning with its highest value market partially closed. DeepSeek keeps releasing frontier models at zero cost, and the public market clock ticks every 90 days. At the 2024 World AI Conference, Yan stated publicly, only 5 large model companies will remain in the global future. That is both a strategic conviction and a self-imposed sentence. If only 5 survive, MiniMax must beat OpenAI on price, DeepSeek on product, Anthropic on legitimacy, its Chinese peers on efficiency, and geopolitics on distribution, all at the same time. The revenue says it is possible: 159% growth, Margin expansion, 214,000 enterprise customers. The burn rate says the clock is real, $1 billion in cash against $250 million a year in losses. In game theory, the MiniMax algorithm assumes your opponent will always make the move that hurts you most. Yan Junjie named his company for that assumption. He built it on that assumption. And the question now is whether 5 opponents making 5 different optimal moves can be survived simultaneously. The answer will not come from a benchmark. It will come from the market, the courtroom, and the negotiating table. And it will come within the year.